happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I'm joined by John and Chris. I hope you didn't miss us too much last week. We were all on site at an event. But this week we are back in our respective homes and we are bringing the show to you live. I don't have my good microphone set up yet, so I don't know why I'm even bothering.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There you go. On this week's show, we are talking about updating your reports for the new year. And really, what we want to do is sort of walk through auditing your reports, sort of where they exist, and updating them in terms of the process and the output if you have new technology, if you're switching platforms. This is something that you don't necessarily have to do for the new year. I probably actually would recommend you don't wait until the new calendar year rolls around. You should probably be auditing your reporting at least quarterly at a minimum. But we'll be talking about how to audit them, creating new processes around the maintenance of your reports, and most importantly, communicating those changes to your stakeholders. Because as you make changes, the data itself will likely change. And then what you don't want is John, reaching out to you at 9 o'clock on a Friday night going, "Why did all my MQLs drop? Where'd they go? What the heck, Katie? Fix the report." And I would say, go to bed, John.
That happens all the time.
So, Chris, where would you like to start this week?
Oh, that's up to you. You are the chief executive. You are the stakeholder. So I guess I would start with, do you have specific user stories for the reports that you care about the most? Because we got tons of reports. We got Google Analytics 4 and HubSpot and Tag Manager and Search Console. We got Data Studio, Looker Studio. We've got our own multi-channel funnel, multi-touch attribution reports. We got reports galore. Like we are the report superstore. But it's like having a supermarket full of groceries. If you don't have a recipe and you don't know what you're cooking, the groceries don't really help.
Well, I went to the store earlier and I didn't have a recipe. I was just hungry. So I didn't come back.
That's how you end up with like 4 cartons full of ho-hos.
Fair. Totally fair.
I've been there, done that, yeah.
Well, in terms of my user story, it would be, as the CEO, I want to update our most used reporting with the latest tools that we're using to collect data, which is still fairly vague. And I would sort of, point back at myself and say, you need to get more specific. And so I would say, if we take a look at formerly Data Studio, now Looker, which is a moronic name, then I would say, I want to update these reports with what our updated KPIs are. How do I know? So, I'm looking at sessions, I'm looking at active users. That doesn't tell me if I'm hitting my goal or not. It just tells me what is. So that might be a good place to start. But also, even before I get to that, I would want to make sure that these reports are using the right data, that I'm looking at the right metrics, those kinds of things.
Got it. Okay, so that's our purpose then. We are all the people that would be involved in this, presumably. Process wise, the first place that you generally go for any report for an auditing is, to your point, figuring out what data is going into that report. So this one here, this report is, I believe, using both Google Analytics 3, Universal Analytics, and Google Analytics 4. So this report's kind of got a blend of the two so that you can sort of do an apples to apples side by side. And if we go into, in Looker Studio, if we go to manage added data sources, we might want to take a look to see, are these data sources current? So I'm going to hit the edit button here and just hit refresh and say, okay, cool. So it's up to date. There's no new data that accidentally snuck its way in. So from if this was cooking, or at least our ingredients haven't changed, right? We did not show up in our kitchen one day and all the apples have been replaced with pomegranates. We still have a barrel of apples. I guess that the next point then is, from a process perspective, what decisions do you make with this information?
Well, I mean, there's two things on this. on this dashboard. One is goal completions. And so I can see basically goal completions by channel and goal completions by source. And so as I'm looking at this, the decision that I am making is which channels are working, which channels need a little bit of love. Now, this is obviously not any sort of a proper attribution report. This is literally a last touch. This is the channel that last, helped convert the person. And so being mindful of that as well when looking at this. This is not an attribution. When I look at the sidebar, I can see, for the time period, total number of goal completions is down. That's something I mean, pretty much everything except for returning users is down. And so that tells me that I have a lot of work to do in terms of getting, the figuring out what's not working on the website that would be causing this, or what changed in our overall marketing that's causing these numbers to go down.
The challenge I think we're running into here, though, is, if you think about your role as a CEO and our role as marketers, do any of these measures on here communicate clearly that we're doing our jobs, that we're being held accountable or not?
Not necessarily, because what's not on here for me is revenue. What's not on here for me is, total number of active clients and that. So as much as I care about what's happening on the website, right now, where my head is I care a little bit more about, our pipeline and our revenue, which is related back to the website. And so I kind of need a blend of both. And right now, that's not reporting that we currently have for Just Insights.
Right. So at this point, then, from a process perspective, you have a very clear purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What would we do to get to that point? What would you direct the marketing team and the analytics team to say, like, yeah, guys, these reports are not doing the job?
I would want to see a breakdown of numbers of every stage of the funnel to say, are we up or down in terms of our, are we driving awareness? So that would be, new users to the website. Are we doing that? Are we getting people to fill out a form? That's our engagement. And so breaking it down that way would be more helpful for me to be able to see, a blend of the website data plus our CRM data broken down by our funnel.
Okay. How do we, if you are a project manager, how do we build that out from a requirements perspective? Because I have in my head a whole bunch of things that we could do, right? We could pull data from the HubSpot API. We could pull data from Google's GA4 data API. We could pull data from the Modic marketing automation system and make a complex, model. But I get the sense that might not be the best approach to just start doing things.
And if you're asking me in terms of what I need to see, I don't want to, or I don't need to see something complex to make a decision. What I need to be able to do is look at a set of numbers, be able to digest it quickly and say, okay, I know what's not working, what is working. And so sort of the way that I would envision it is, I have basically, whatever our, sales journey looks like. So all the way from awareness to purchase, breaking it down into like 4 or 5 buckets of numbers, and just looking at those numbers and having the conversion rates between each of those things. And then that would tell me, okay, things are going up, things are going down, and then an overall revenue number.
Okay. So we'd have to then figure out if that's the purpose, we'd have to figure out the mechanism, the platform for doing that, because that's not something that exists right now.
Right, which is why I don't have it. And thus why we're here.
Exactly. But if we're, I would imagine that probably a lot of other stakeholders have similar requests.
Mm-hmm.
How should they communicate those requests to, their teams in a way that's productive, not just saying, hey, I want this and I want it tomorrow?
They need to communicate it in a way that explains sort of the 5 Ps. It's, what is the problem I am trying to solve? Because what ends up happening is what I think I need versus what I actually need are sometimes two different things. Um, and so I need to be able to articulate what it actually is that I'm trying to do. So what I'm trying to do was understand the different steps of our funnel so that I can fix what's not working. So if I can share my screen, let me see if I can do this without breaking the whole uh, presentation. I have a very basic spreadsheet that I've been keeping since 2019, as you can see on the tabs. And so I have, and this is last year's data. I have all these different metrics going down the side, and this is something that I capture twice a month because any more than that, I just don't have the time to do it. And so what I've done over here on the side, if you can see, is I've basically created that very basic funnel. So I have my audience, my awareness, my prospects, leads, deals, and closed won. And so this, at a very, very basic level, tells me the um, the
The stages.
conversions, the stages,
Yeah.
the conversions between each. And so the good news is we have a great win rate. And something we know from last year is that our data entry into our CRM wasn't as good as it should be. And that's something we've worked on for this year. And so I would look at this and go, what is going on with these three numbers? What part of the process is broken? Um, and so that's how I would start to use it. So I think in terms of gathering requirements, having a stakeholder who's having a hard time articulate what they want, have them do a demo, a hands-on demo, and you, the engineer or the project manager or whoever, watch what they're doing and ask them questions because it's a lot like running a usability study or a focus group. You give someone like a physical thing to work with, and you say, and you don't give them instruction, you just say, you know, show me how you fill the cart and check it out on this website. And you watch the patterns that they go through, you watch the steps that they take, and then you can start to figure out, okay, it looks like they're having a hard time finding the add to cart button. That's something I need to fix. So you don't necessarily say, do you know where the add to cart button is? The person will be like, of course I do. But then it takes them 20 different clicks to find it. And so it's a lot like that. So I would say if you're working with someone who thinks they know what they want, but they're having a hard time articulating it, have them walk through a demo or have them show you, here are the 8 different spreadsheets I use to get to this answer. And then you, as the data engineer and the project manager, can be like, okay, there's a better way to do this. This is what that looks like.
Got it. Let's talk about auditing reports for a second too, because I think there's some value in there. Suppose we have this report. This is our multi-touch attribution report. How would we go about auditing a report? Suppose, like, what would I be trying to do to audit? To say that it's useful, it's not useful. What does an auditing a report involve?
The first thing you do is, what question does this report answer? What decisions can you make from this report? So John, you talk a lot with prospects about the digital customer journey report, which is what we're looking at. So when you're talking with them, what do you tell them in terms of, and then this report answers that question, or what decisions can they make?
Yeah, this report is huge for them because it verifies the channels that they're already working from. When you show them a first cut of it, it's, okay, look, this is where we see your campaign should be prioritized. I mean, if you were in a budgeting cycle, you'd be looking at this and your percentage of spend would match the returns based on the size of those channels. So the biggest thing is the first gut check of like, okay, we would presume that you are spending 80% of your time on email. Is that the case? And if they're like, oh yeah, no, one person does that on the side, realigning all that kind of stuff is huge, because we see so many clients that, they're messing around with Facebook ads, and then we run this report and see that it's less than 1% of their overall marketing activity and stuff that they're bringing in. It really highlights, what is supposed to be happening in reality. And then the other half of it is just if it opens up questions. They'll see things and they'll be like, oh, I didn't know that this program was still running. And I didn't realize that that program is not doing anything at all. So it's, verify what you already know and then start to ask some more interesting questions. That's kind of the two biggest gaps that this thing brings to light.
Mm-hmm.
Does every part of a report need to answer a question?
No, it doesn't, and that's where the structure of the report is essential. And so this is why I personally always like to have that executive summary, those key takeaways that you can immediately answer. Like, this is what I need to know. If I look at nothing else, I need to look at the executive summary slide so I know what the heck is in this report. And so to me, that is the most important part of the report is the bullet points of like, what is the data telling me? What actions can I take? What decisions can I make? And then the rest is just context.
Got it. So for this report, we have two different actions to take.
Mhm.
One is for Spotify, and then one is for removing an ad server.
Mhm.
But that seems like pretty clear decision making, but it doesn't make a lot of decisions.
It doesn't. And that doesn't tell me at a glance, uh, organic search is starting to suffer. You need to do something about it. Or you're over indexed on email. Make sure you're balancing it a little bit more. And you do get that information in the rest of the report. Absolutely. But in terms of, if you're asking me my personal use case, I find this report informative, but not actionable.
Okay, so how would we change that? Because we're talking about auditing our reports and then making
Mhm.
changes so that they're more useful. Like we have this referring sources report. This one tells you where your referring traffic is from.
Mhm.
When I see this, I interpret this as which sites are giving us extra traffic for free.
Mhm.
And the decision I would make is if there's a site here that I don't recognize, to reach out to them and say, so like nps.edu, who is that? And
Mhm.
maybe it's somebody, if it's a school, should we be talking to them and saying like, hey, do you need more of our content? If that was something we cared about. Content Marketing Institute, right? We know who those folks are. We know that when they ask us for contributed content, it does well. It sends traffic back to us. So that would be an opportunity we want to continue to nurture.
Right, but you have to understand that context of the data on the report in order to make that decision. And so if I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who's not in the weeds with the data, like I am with you, then I would look at this and go, what the heck am I looking at?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that as you're gathering requirements and building out reporting and telling those stories with the data, that's sort of the kiss of death is if someone says, what the heck am I looking at? I don't get it. Their brain has already moved on to something else because they're no longer engaged in what it is you're trying to show them and what it is you've worked so hard to put together.
Gotcha. So what should I do differently with this report for someone like you or someone like John?
Um, it needs to, at least from my opinion, it needs to have some actions. And so in this report, part of it is knowing the business and sort of knowing what's important to the person that you're sharing it with. And so this particular slide should give me guidance of, you know, uh, you know, it looks like you're getting great referral traffic from, whatever that second one down is. See if you can get more content placed on that. Or, it looks like there's some spam on here. Have your marketing team reach out to them and see if you can get whatever links those are removed or whatever the actions are. And then I'll look at that and go, okay, got it. That goes on the punch list. I can delegate that out and I can get that done so that when I see this report again next month, I can see that those things were taken care of.
Got it. Okay. So call outs and then and boiling up. How many different action items should you try to distill? Because I mean, from this report alone, there's
Mhm.
probably a good 2 or 3 different action items.
Well, and so I think that whatever the actions are fine. Like if there's three actions on this particular slide, that's great. But that then you I would take all of those individual actions and roll them back up into the key takeaways so that it's matching. And so I can either just look at the takeaway slides and trust that that's what the data is telling me, or I can go through with each individual department and go, okay, SEO team, these are your actions. Here's why. Email marketing team, these are your actions. And so for us, we don't have all those different teams. And so for me, it's more helpful to see all the actions in one place. So it's in two places. It's on the individual slides and then rolled up into a punch list.
Got it. Okay, so from a lead generation perspective, this is what our lead generation looks like right now. We have email being 79% of our leads, followed by public speaking, then Slack, Google search, some referral traffic, Twitter, then Facebook and LinkedIn. So what, from your position as a decision maker, what decisions do you want to make from this?
So one of the challenges with this particular report, and I've mentioned this, just offline, is that this doesn't give me a month over month comparison. So, yep, email's up, but what was it last month? So now I have to go back, find the other report, and then try to put the two together and say, wait, what am I? And so I don't have a sense of if that's better or worse than the previous period of time. And so I can only say, well, Slack is doing good. Do more of it. That's great. I can't say Slack is doing better than it was last month. So those 5 things that you've been doing in that channel are working. Keep doing it. Or those 5 things that you're doing have decreased the number of leads that have come in from Slack. So take a look at that tactic and see if it's actually worth doing or if it's worth the time. That's the challenge I have with this particular kind of report is I have no idea if it's better or worse. And trying to compare it to the previous month is really difficult. And even if you have it like slide 1 and then slide 2, flipping back and forth, by the time I get to slide 2, I've already forgotten what was on slide 1. And so that, to me, as a decision maker, I would have a very hard time making a thoughtful decision without more information.
Okay. So as a developer, then how do we fix this, right? Because the process for the requirement is pretty straightforward. We need some comparison to the previous time period. But now we're talking about, thankfully, this is our own software. Right. But suppose you're using straight out of the box Google Analytics, it just won't do that. What do you do in those cases?
So if you scroll up to the previous slide where it's the roll up of all the channels, if nothing else, something that would be helpful is some indication of this channel is performing better or worse than the previous month. And then I can dig into the details on the next slide. So, even if it's like, and please don't start including this in our reports, but that's just an example. Even if it's a goofy, like, a red arrow up or a thumbs up, like, it's up 2% from last month. And so that would be a manual thing that you would add in, but it's just to this one slide so that I, the decision maker, can look at it and go, okay, social's doing better things. Got it. Keep doing what we're doing on social. And then I can look at the individual channels to see which channels are contributing.
I am totally going to load the emoji library into R.
Please do not do this.
Smiley faces everywhere.
Exactly. Little money with wings.
You can give me the passive aggressive thumbs up.
Okay, so that's auditing reports. Then this is the process: is looking at each report and deciding what to do with it.
Well, and that's essentially. And so it's deciding what to do with it, but then also auditing the data sources themselves, and that might not be an exercise that you need to do with the stakeholder. It's, once you get the information from the person who is receiving the report, the person who is making the decisions with the report, you can then take all of that feedback and go, okay, we've been looking at Google Analytics data, but really we need to be looking at Facebook data to answer that question. And so that then becomes part of the audit is, is this still answering questions? So it's sort of the 6 C's of data quality. Is the data, clean? Is it chosen? Is it correct? Is it answering the question being asked? And when you first started creating the report, perhaps it did. But if you are auditing it on a regular basis, the goals are going to change, the questions are going to change, the decisions are going to change, the data source might also change.
How do we it sounds like there's a lot of work. How do we create a process around well,
It's why
I,
people don't do it.
exactly, and it's from a technical perspective, because we've not been doing it, we've
Mhm,
accumulated a lot of technical debt on this. At the moment right now, it's kind of an opportune time because we have to rewrite all these reports for Google Analytics 4. We have to
mhm.
switch data sources. We're not being given a choice. So as this is happening, we have a chance to reboot things. So how do we create a process around the maintenance of these reports so that they don't continue to accumulate technical debt once we've made these changes?
I mean, you really put me on the spot today, my friend.
I am,
Um,
because you are the master of all things process. I am just the ball of barely organized
chaos.
chaos.
And John, where do you fit into this equation?
I always get the end result of the reports. That's where it comes to me. It's just like, here's the thing, let's do it.
Well, and I guess as a stakeholder, John, before we move on, are there things, that you would want to have different? Because, it's, and that's sort of where digging into this is helpful, because I'm not the only stakeholder of this report. I'm a stakeholder in terms of decision maker. John's a stakeholder in terms of he needs to convince other stakeholders that they also need this report. And so, is there anything missing from the report that you would need, or anything that's not useful?
No, it's interesting though. The thing that made me think about is that there's kind of another class of reports too, because this is all roll up and strategic stuff. But the reports that I always live and die by are like the daily notification reports and things that are
Hmm.
saying like, okay, here's the 3 that came in last night. Let's go dig into those and see what's going on. So it's a
Hmm.
lot more like smoke alarm stuff than strategic reports. Um, but yeah, and you bring up another great point, with clients, it's all about, are they willing and able to do these strategic looks? A lot of people just don't even want to go look in the junk drawer or the back closet because they're afraid of what they're going to find.
Hmm.
And so it's a filtering mechanism for us. We kind of know that, look, if you're the kind of person that dodges the truth when it's inconvenient, then odds are you're never going to be a customer for us, because, now and then there's bad news and you need to be able to take that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's really just who is brave enough to kind of go in and look at all the channels and figure out where to go. And then unfortunately, we can't give you any going forward. If there's some data, we can do go forward predictions, but otherwise there's another step too you have to take of like, okay, do we double down on something we already have, or do we try and increase something that we think is not doing as well as it should?
Hmm.
And so that is one thing that we have seen from prospects is like, they don't want the full details. They would rather just have like, give me your top 3 things that we need to do from this stuff.
Hmm.
And that's a blind spot for us too, because we don't realize that they're not reading these reports every day like we are. If they're getting them thrown at them once a month, it's a little bit different thing. And so the summary and hand holding is actually a big part of the service.
Hmm. No, and that totally makes sense. So, Chris, to your question about, what is the process for auditing? Um, Shocker of all shockers, it starts with documentation. And so,
I was
as
afraid you were going to say that.
well, you shouldn't have asked. Um, in order to audit something and know that you have all the pieces, you first need to know what the pieces are. And that starts with some kind of documentation. Who uses it? What decisions do they make? What are the data sources? What is the frequency? What is the, data storage? All of those things. Basically, dissecting every piece of the report into some kind of a checklist or an organized document, so that as you're auditing these, you don't have to redo that discovery. You've done it. And so it's documenting the requirements as you're building the thing. So then you have those requirements, say this is what we built. So then when you go to audit it, you can say, is this still what we need? And then you're updating that document to say this is what's changed. That's the essence of, project management. And so making sure that you're collecting all of the data and then delivering back what people have asked for.
So if I am auditing my reports for the coming year, and I'm trying to reduce the number of reports, because
Mhm.
I got 47 reports on my desk every month. Um, do you How do you start to winnow that down? Do you construct a user story for every report, or do you start at the other end and construct like a user story for every KPI, and then say, do the reports we have answer this user story?
Definitely the latter, because I can come up with a reason to keep every single report. It's like, sorting through your clothes. I can come up with a reason to keep t-shirts that I've had for 20 years, but am I ever really going to wear them? Or is it more of like a nostalgia thing? Probably the nostalgia. I don't actually need to keep it. Have I worn it in 2 years? Probably not. Um, and so it's starting with, because if you ask people report by report, they're going to give you reasons to not, you know, start to take that one off the table. But if you start with what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve, what are the actual goals and metrics and KPIs that you need to track, then you can say, great. So you have all of these reports. 46 of the 47 do not answer that question. So let's just start with the one that does answer that question. And so it doesn't mean that you have to completely, do like an end of life with all of the other reports. They just don't get prioritized right now. You can come back to those at another time. And that's sort of the other piece of it is if you have, for example, 4 to 7 reports, you don't need to audit them all at once. You can stagger them by priority.
What do we do when we have reports that we don't have control over? So this is a good example. This is Google Analytics 4. This is the attribution modeling, which is somehow in the advertising section. I don't know why they do that, but and what we're looking at here is this is lead generation. So I've chosen the conversions in Google Analytics 4 for our website that lead to a form fill. And what we've got, is essentially a funnel, right? We can see which channels participate sort of early touch points early on. We have a 19% of the conversion occurs here. We have the mid funnel, which is 26%, and then we have the late touch points, the thing that really pushes somebody over at the end. And we can see organic social is sort of the secondary channel right behind email. Email is the dominant channel across all three. Organic social is number 2. We have organic search number 3. To your point, we can make at least some cursory decisions here. We could say, like, for example, it looks like organic search really should be bigger than this. Like, clearly something's not working well if organic search is just not, it is just such a tiny fraction. We might not be doing a great job there.
But we don't know compared to the previous period. Maybe it's improving.
Yeah, you'd have to do the little date change and change the thing there to do that.
The fact that you can't see them together means that you're already losing the person who needs to make the decision. I'm not going to make decisions with this particular report because to me, it's just bars. I don't have enough information to move budgets around or decide whether or not to reallocate people or to say for certain, yeah, you're doing a great job with email, because what this doesn't tell me, and I know based on how the goal is set up, is all form fills. What I care about is contact form fills. And so it's only because I know our system and how it's set up. This doesn't tell me that. This could also be people who are quote unquote signing up for an unsubscribe or contacting us to like get me off your list. So for all I know, email's great for getting people to unsubscribe. I would be making the absolute wrong decision because I don't have enough context on this particular chart.
Thankfully, we don't count unsubscribes in this form fills.
But you understand what I'm saying.
So I don't have control over the system, and I'm the person reporting to you. What do I do? Do I just start manually copying and pasting all the data into an Excel spreadsheet and then making a custom chart just for you so that it meets those requirements? Because I can't do it with this software.
I think you just described 100% of the clients that come to us. And that's exactly the problem, is trying to do reporting in a system like this is a losing battle. And that's why, when we talk about Google Analytics, for example, we say, don't try to do the reporting inside that system. You need to extract the data into something else, like a data studio that is going to give you a little bit more flexibility to meet those requirements set by your stakeholder. And so finding the right tool for the job, we just did a whole big workshop on this, is half the battle. This is not the right tool for the job.
Got it. All right. Well, it sounds like my job as a marketer here is done then. I'm just not going to do any report.
I actually feel like it's the opposite. I feel like you just gave yourself a heck of a lot of work to do.
But that use case of I can't get the tools to do what I want, so everything goes into Excel, is 100% of our client base, even with today's tools, even with tools like Looker Studio and stuff. It's still not meeting those requirements. So it sounds like
Right.
as much as piles of Excel spreadsheets laying around is not a long-term sustainable option, it sounds like if you have very specific requirements that you've been very clear about, and you can't get your tools to do that, but you can get Excel to do that, you've met the requirements.
Right. And so then you give that sheet back to me and say, can you make a decision with this? And I say yes or no. And
Which
I can make a decision with an Excel spreadsheet. And I know that, wounds your soul a little bit, but I can. And that's why people still rely on them, because you can blend, for someone who isn't a data engineer, you can blend data into an Excel spreadsheet to make a decision, which is, essentially what I showed you at the beginning of this particular episode is what I have. I have an Excel spreadsheet. Would I love better metrics? Would I love something more automated? Absolutely. But right now, that's what I have.
Got it. So what do we do next? What's the path forward if we know that the existing tools can't do that? Now, I know I have the answer in my head, which is okay. We need to start creating more connections to different APIs and build a BigQuery table that stores the dates ranges and stuff like that. But that's A, an N of one, and B, probably not realistic for 90-ish% of organizations that don't have highly technical resources dedicated to marketing. For somebody who's not Trust Insights, what do they do?
Without sounding cheesy, you hire Trust Insights. Call John.
Call today. That's right.
Call this guy, but that is, as you are being asked more advanced questions, you need systems to keep up with it. Sure, you can automate a Google Sheet with API connections to give someone something that they essentially are used to seeing, but there's limitations to that. And so it's really getting detailed user stories, requirements but what is it that you really need, and watching them go through and make decisions. And so, where appropriate, say, show me how you make a decision with this data. Show me from I have a question to I'm looking at the data to I'm making a decision to I'm taking action. And then that can start to inform whether or not you look at more sophisticated tools. I mean, we've been saying it, to an annoying point. There's over 9,000 tools in the marketing tech stack system alone. There's got to be a tool that does something close to what you need. But before you can pick out a tool, you need to know what you need. And that is the piece that's going to take the longest, is figuring out what you need. And that need is going to continue to evolve. And so that's why we say you need to audit it, and audit it at least once a quarter, if not more frequently, if you have the opportunity to do so.
All right, John, any parting thoughts before we head on out?
Just make sure reports are done on time. That's it.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, and our weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.